Hi, my name is Sabu Francis, and I am going to talk about how to understand objective information in architecture. Now, what does that mean? Back in IIT, when I was studying, there used to be this debate between the subjective and the objective. Subjective would be, people make statements after looking at a design and say, subjectively speaking, this is not a nice design. That's a kind of a polite way of saying that I don't think it's a nice design. So the subject is me. And it was a way to, escape criticism of the criticism, so to speak. So you can say that, this design is not nice, but it's me who thinks that it is not nice. You may be thinking it is nice. Then there's this objective way of criticizing where you say, for example, I'll say this is a mouse. Now, when I say this is a mouse, I'm talking about an object outside of me, and there will be other people who will be agreeing that this is indeed a mouse, a computer mouse, that is. And if it was a mouse and I say it is a living mouse, then I'm making a subjective statement. That means I personally think it is like a living mouse, but I'm splitting hairs here. Architecture is full of subjectivity. But why architecture? Any statement which we make will surely be subjective, right? Because it is coming from me. Now, when I teach architecture and when I express points to my students, I find that there is many times, many people will come to me and say, sir, do you think this is nice? And I really hesitate in explaining whether it's nice or not, because being nice is, thinking that something is nice is a very subjective opinion. And it may not add much value to that particular student. So many times I avoid trying to get into this talk about nice and not nice. Instead, it may be better to talk about objective information, things which both me and the student, or me and my fellow teachers, we can objectively talk about something. Now, this does create some sense of boredom sometimes, I guess, because when you're constantly talking about things which everybody agrees on, then there's no real controversy. And sometimes it is nice to have controversies, and you can just wallow around in some loose definitions and all that. However, if we were to really learn something, learning is best done when we get all the objective information sorted out and out of the way, and we have all that at our fingertips, and then we can privately think about the subjective points. Now, it really doesn't happen that you think about objective first and then the subjective. That is not what happens. It is all going to be, they are all going to be intertwined, and you really cannot differentiate between did you think in objective terms or did you think in subjective terms. Nevertheless, it's best that we look at the objective parts of the subject or the piece of knowledge which we are handling. I think I used objective and subjective quite too often until here. You'll have to forgive me. What I'm trying to point out is that, let me give you an example. One of the few things which architecture has, I should not say few, there are many things, but the thing which many times is missed is that when you talk about, say, subject like, say, structure, for example, or when you talk about a topic like climatology in architecture, often it's glossed over, the real objective parts of it, the things which you can really agree upon, all people agree upon. That objective part is not really sorted out, and instead we have a very hazy idea about how we want to design a building to be climatically responsive, or how do we design the building so that it is structurally stable. And quite often, especially in structures, I've noticed this. Many architects also has the same problem because they were poorly trained, and many students for sure, they descend down to the lowest level of understanding structure, and then they come up with a design which really it does not explore much of structure. For example, they will say, I know many architects do this, even practicing architects do this. They are most comfortable when you put things on a grid. Why? Because to their mind, a grid will not pose any difficulty when you have to design the structure. And this limits the kind of design which actually comes out, and they don't realize that it is limiting, but they kind of accept that, saying that, okay, this is how I would design. I just want the grid in that. Why? Because they got very little objective information, and whatever little they got, they are comfortable with that, and then they work only on around that. Same thing happens in climate, where people believe that I have so many other concerns to think about in my design. I know a little bit of climate and all that, but let me not worry too much into all the details. I'll just get all the visual part of it right, subjectively speaking, and then they just design something, and the climate is an accidental point which they're considering, which is a tragedy. Because if you look at all these kind of subjects inside architecture, all these topics, I should not call it subject, all these topics in architecture, there always going to be a healthy amount of objective information which you need to really consider and know very well, and we don't. In many topics, the kind of knowledge which we need, the kind of objective knowledge which we need, comes in layers. In climate, for example, many people do not even, I'm sad to say, many people do not even know that the earth is rotating on its own axis, but the axis itself is tilted. As you can see here in this globe, the axis of the rotation of the earth is at a tilt with respect to the plane of the rotation. We have seen globes of this nature, right? And we need to really internalize what is happening, because the axis is tilted. Now, the window is right in front of me. I changed the direction of how I'm recording. So right now, if I were to hold this in this manner, okay, you can see some part of it becoming dark here towards this side, and that's a part where it is becoming evening. So as it rotates, you find that it has become dark on one part of the globe, and it is light on the other part. Obviously, the part where it is light is where it is day, and the part which is shade is where it is night. Now, more than that, we have to see that this, because of the tilt of the tilt of the axis of the earth, there will be a larger part. Say in this case, the lower half of this earth is presenting itself to the sunlight. That means it's summer in the southern hemisphere and it's winter in the northern hemispheres. So obviously it is because of the tilt of the axis of the earth which is causing the seasons. Now, this objective information about how the earth is and how it is tilted, these are non-debatable, because everybody will have to agree on this. This is already scientifically proved that is how the earth is rotating. There are some approximations, of course. The earth is not exactly a sphere, but by and large, for architecture at least, for most of the buildings which we design, the fact that the earth is slightly squashed at the poles and it is slightly bulging out from a sphere is not really going to make much of a difference. But nevertheless, we have to know all the parts which we can all agree upon. How is the earth's axis tilted, in what direction it gets tilted, how is the summer caused, how is the winter caused, why is it that we can have unequal days and unequal nights, and why is it that only 2 days in a year you have the equinoxes, where you have both equal amount of day and equal amount of night. Starting from that, you can now then go down into the next layer of understanding about climate, and then start imagining yourself plonked on one of the spots on that particular earth. And when you're standing on that spot, so obviously your legs are going to face exactly the center of the earth, and that is how gravity works. So when you say perpendicular, it means your body is in such a manner that it actually points directly into the center of the earth. Quite amazing actually, if you really look at it. So if you are here, also you are actually pointed right there into the center of the earth, and that's what's perpendicular there. That's why you don't fall off, because gravity is holding you all inside onto the top of the earth. Now, if you were to understand how the sun path diagram works and how the sun is moving across, sun is obviously not moving, it's the earth which is moving, but you can make it look as if the sun is traveling across the sky dome. But where is that sky dome? How do you know where the dome is? So that's also another piece of objective information you have to internalize, which is at the level of that local space, that particular local territory you are here. Suppose I am here on somewhere in North America, and then I am in that region. So just around the point where you're standing, you mark a circle around that, and that outer boundary of that circle is the outer boundary of the sun path diagram. That's yet another objective information you need to be comfortable with, and you need to agree on, because everybody will agree on that, and that's why it's called objective information. Similarly, you have to now start identifying various parts of the sun path diagram. What are the lines on the sun path diagram? What are the concentric circles on the sun path diagram? And that all those information are actually non-controversial. There is no way somebody can say, no, it, to me, subjectively speaking, it means something else. No, it can't mean something else. It is always going to be what it means for that sun path diagram. Now, if you do not use this approach, and if you try to understand climate and the way the earth works and the way the rotation of the earth works, and you have your own theories for that, and that means you are putting in your subjectivity into this whole thing, you are going to be absolutely wrong, and you will be standing alone with your own interpretations. Unfortunately, many architects do have such interpretations, and we end up with bad design. So I'll be giving more knowledge about how to really go about talking about climate and how the earth works and how the sun path diagram works. The objective of this particular talk, there again there's a word objective, but this time it means something else, is to understand the difference between what is subjective information and what is objective information. Objective information simply means that if you state that information, there will not be any controversy. Everybody around you, everybody in the world will agree to it. So my point here is that in architecture, whenever you learn various topics in architecture, there are surely going to be subjective interpretations. No issues with that. Each individual person can think through it. But at least let's get the objective information about those topics absolutely properly laid out and understood and thrashed, and and that's how we build up our knowledge. If you don't do that, and if you mix up that subjectivity even in that objective information, you're surely going to get into trouble. You may think that, no, you know what, the sun doesn't work the way it was written, and I think it works like that, or you'll bring in some astrology, or you'll bring in some superstition, or you'll bring in some religious interpretations into your design, and it'll just all hokum pokum, and nothing really will be properly achieved. So that's it in this short video. It was all about objectivity and subjectivity. Thank you so much. We are going to make a lot of videos. We'll have mentors mentoring architects, students, and even fellow teachers on what is this subject of architecture and what are the nuances in the topics inside architecture. So that's archopus.com. Thank you so much.